Today we are turning up the heat in the Owen defense. Alright, so e4, b6, d4 and bishop to b7, the Owen defense and how to crush it. Well, first of all, our pawn is hanging, so we'll defend it with bishop to d3, and now most play this pawn to e6, and we will play this tricky move, knight to c3. Well, not really a tricky move, but the point is we want to get our knight pinned with bishop to b4, which is the most played move, and we will continue with knight to e2. Now, already in this position, they messed it up and they developed knight to f6, which is a supernatural looking move, putting more pressure on the e4 as our knight is not covering it as it is pinned. But this is not correct. If we turn on the engine, this is already plus 1.7. What they should really do is play pawn to d5, but we will get back to this line in the end of this video. Let's just stick with the main line, and the main move here is knight to f6. Okay, we will continue with pawn to e5, harassing the knight, and they usually go to d5. They have an option to go to e4. This doesn't really change much. Let's see, knight to d5. Well, you can either get castled here, which is fine, but I prefer this move, which will lead to a tricky position. Pawn to a3, hitting the bishop. Now, with this move, we are kind of facilitating a big trade on the c3 square, as you can see from the most played moves. Pretty much like half of your opponents will capture with the bishop and the other half will capture with the knight first. So let's see, if they capture with the knight, we recapture with our knight, and now they should really capture the knight with their bishop. Moving the bishop somewhere back to e7 doesn't really make much sense in this position for them. This would lead to a strong attack for us. So they should capture, and once we recapture with the b-pawn, we end up in this position, which is super tricky, and the three most played moves are already a losing blunders. So as you can see, queen to h4 is the correct move here, so we will get back to that later. Let's just have a look at what's wrong with the three most played moves. So the first most played move is bishop captures on g2. The second most played move is getting castled, so trying to get the king safe, which is not really very safe if they get castled, simply because we have already this strong bishop pair aimed at the king side, combined with the queen, and there is no defender on f6 like there should be. So they will really get crushed if they get castled. The third most played move is pawn to d6, which is maybe playable, but they would have to come up with these weird walks of shame with their king. I will show you later. Let's have a look at bishop captures on g2 first. So if they capture here, let's also turn on the stockfish. This is already super winning, plus 6 almost. We will continue with queen to g4, hitting the bishop and hitting the g7 pawn. And after they capture the rook, we capture on g7, harassing their rook. They really need to protect it. And now, just remember, it looks very appealing to just play bishop to h6 to double up on the rook, but they are in time to defend with queen to e7. So what we have to do is throw in bishop to g5 first, because now we are hitting the queen. The engine wants to give it up. Like, who's going to be playing that? They would, I believe, just move the queen over, and here we go, bishop to h6, doubling up on the rook, and there is no way to save it. They need to go like king to e7, but after this check they are forced back, and now we can capture this rook, and they cannot even capture the bishop because that would hang their queen like this. Yeah. And that one guy in this position, he played pawn to f6. Well, this one is also not correct. First of all, we can capture this. And they once again have to just give up the queen. But anyways, if they do anything else, like develop a knight or something, we have mate in 4. We go check, they can capture this, we capture back, the rook is forced to cover, we go here and check, they go here and we checkmate with our pawn. So this is how you easily win against bishop captures on g2. The second most played move is getting castled. Now, this is already like plus 5. Once again, we go queen to h5 this time. So with this move, we are threatening a checkmate on h7, so they need to deal with this. Now, there are two moves that stop the checkmate. It is g6 or h6. And well, let's have a look at h6 first, because it is more fun. Here you can even go crazy with sacrificing the bishop on h7. After they capture, you capture with the queen. And now, because you are still threatening this checkmate, the only correct response is to push f5. And now, look at this, pawn to g4. What a move. Basically, we are saying, hey man, you play the Owen defense. We know you like capturing this rook. So go ahead and do what you have to do, because after you capture the rook, we just get the G file open, and that was the point. Now here Stockfish would recommend some funny moves like giving up the rook for a pawn, but also rook to f7 seems to be playable, but after pawn to f6, now they want to trade queens, but we decline with queen to h4, and let's say they try to develop something, let's say they develop the knight. Our plan is to bring the king up, and the best response from black here is to hang the queen on the g7 square. How cool is this opening? Alright, well, you can have fun analyzing these crazy lines on your own. I don't want to waste all your day. Okay, let's go back. Let's see pawn to g6. Here we will park our queen on h6. They should once again respond with f5, trying to block our bishop, but now they cannot really stop us from pushing these pawns forward, and we will just tear their position up and bring our rooks on the open files. Yeah, so h4, let's see this, for example, queen to e7, we push h5. They shouldn't open it up, but they have no choice, because after they push the pawn we capture with the bishop, they can go ahead and try to exchange the queens, yeah, but it is still just crushing for us, even without the queens on the board. Let's say they capture this. Our plan is to bring our rooks to the G and H files, and now they are just cooked. Let's go back, and let's have a look at the third most played move, which is pawn to d6. So in this position they are not totally lost yet, but after queen to g4 we are hitting the g7 pawn, and the correct move is to defend it with the king. And well, you know, people are pretty stubborn and they just don't like to play such moves. As you can see, most guys tried pawn to g6, but this is now like pretty bad for them, because we get to play bishop to g5 with the tempo on the queen, and we have no issues parking the bishop on f6, making sure that black king will never be able to get safely castled. And yeah, from here we will just find a way to open the things up for our rooks and just feast on black pieces. To give you just a illustrating line, we go rook to e1. They try to develop, but they are slow. We capture here, and if they capture with the pawn, we have rook captures. And if they capture, this is a checkmate. And if they find the correct move and they play the king to f8, oh, I mean, this is still just great for us. They will never be able to get castled. We will just march our pieces and pawns forward and get the king eventually, hopefully. Yeah. Alright. Anyways, now let's have a look at the correct response, which is queen to h4. In this position, you have an option to choose. You can either be safe and just get castled and be boring, or you can be adventurous and play for tricks. And you can play bishop to e3, because with this move, we know that Owen defenders, their hands are itching because they want to capture this pawn, and I mean, why wouldn't they in this position? Look at this, 4 people out of 5 in this position captured on g2. Yeah, so this is what we are hoping for in this variation. Now it's not lost for them, but it will get super tricky, and actually with the correct play where black will find the only moves, they will have to give up their rook. I mean, they will have to give up their queen for a rook and a bishop. Let's see this. So we go rook to g1, hitting the bishop. It doesn't make much sense for them to just retreat the bishop and allow our rook to infiltrate, so they need to keep the bishop protected. It's either with the queen to h3, or they can capture the pawn on h2, which is what most humans will do, I presume. Is that the word? But here we have this sneaky move, king to d2. Well, of course, this keeps our rook protected as it was hanging, but second of all, we have a very nasty threat. And the threat is to bring our queen to g4 in this position, which would be super crushing. And the only playable move for black here is to move queen to h3 to stop queen to g4. But let me just show you like what happens if they don't. If they develop like a knight, you can see queen to h4, it's +5 something. The reason is we are not only hitting the bishop, but also we are hitting the g7 pawn, and well, in this particular case, after bishop retreats, we can easily trap the bishop like this. And if they don't play knight to c6, but for example they get castled, this is even more crushing, because after queen to g4 we are not only hitting the bishop but also x-raying this checkmate. So what would they do here? I don't know. Let me show you what they have to do. They have to play queen to h3, and now we have this move. Bishop to e2, and with this we are threatening to bring the bishop to g4. So there is once again only one correct move for black, and it is developing knight to c6. If they do something else, for example, I could imagine they would get castle here. We go bishop to g4, we are hitting the queen. The queen needs to stay in touch with their bishop, otherwise it is hanging. So the queen would go to h2, and now just bishop back to f3. And they have to give up the queen, but this is crushing for us in this position. If they don't, if they just capture the bishop, which seems natural and normal thing to do, we recapture with our queen and we are super winning because we have 3 strong threats. The threat number 1 is to bring the queen to f6 and just, focus on getting them checkmated. The second threat is to just grab this rook, and also the third threat is to move rook to g1, which traps the queen. So that's why we are super winning here. And the correct thing that they had to do was to bring the knight to c6. So I believe the reason is in the future the rook will not be hanging, so they kind of protected against one of the threats. Sorry for my English today. Okay, but still here we continue with bishop to g4. As I mentioned, the queen needs to go to h2, and now still bishop to f3, and they still have to get the rook and lose their queen. This is the only move. If they capture the bishop, we are still winning after queen recaptures, because, well, I think the engine will recommend some weird moves here, but after something like getting castled, this just traps the queen and we are, up a queen. So what they would have to do here is capture this rook. We capture the queen, they can have our bishop as well. And in this position, Stockfish says this is equal, but we have a queen, and they don't. Duh, we are winning. It's plus something for white, alright. Anyway, so this is what you can do against the correct play, which was queen to h4. Alright, now, time to go back in time, because this all stuff happened after they captured with the knight in this position after we played pawn to a3. There are some more lines if they capture with the bishop. You see here, you still recapture with the knight, and the correct move would be to go queen to h4 here, but this got played like once. Anyways, most guys will capture the knight, and now you don't even have to capture back. You could, if you wanted to, you can capture this and you pretty much end up in the same position as before, so you don't have to learn a new theory if you are lazy like me. But the thing is, the strongest move here is to go queen to g4 right away, not even bothering winning the piece back. Because here, once again, the only correct response would be to play king to f8, which I don't think anybody will play soon. But their knight is hanging, so let's see some new lines. For example, this one guy, he played pawn to g6. Well, this is now a losing blunder because of bishop to g5. Basically, the same idea is here. And after they move the queen, now we recapture and we will have our bishop strong on f6 in the future. They will never be castled. We will crush them. So that was g6. let's say they will try to protect the knight and move it out of the danger. Well, now we can capture on g7 and force their rook to hide on f8, and here is where we go bishop to h6, because now if they cover the rook with queen to e7, unfortunately for them the queen has taken away the only retreating square this knight had, and we trap the knight with pawn to c4. And we will win our piece back, also maintaining a strong position. So this is winning for white once again. Now, let's go back even one step further, because as I mentioned, knight to f6 is a mistake in the opening by black, and what they should have played is pawn to d5. So it is cool, but also in this variation the most played moves lead to a winning position for white. So we can push our pawn to e5, and most guys here will follow it up with pawn to c5. It looks like a strong move, it grabs some space, it undermines the pawn chain in the center, but we can easily refute it with pawn to a3. Now they are forced to capture the knight, we recapture back, and most guys here will capture on d4, and the second most played move is pawn to c4, but these are both not very good moves. Let me show you. If they capture here, we will bring our knight to b5, and suddenly we are threatening this check, and it is actually not possible to stop this check, and this check leads to this bishop. So it is funny, but the most played move here is knight to c6, which just hangs the bishop. What they should do is play bishop to a6, but we give them this check, the king runs to f8, and now after queen to h5 we are threatening a checkmate on f7. And if your opponent just lazily play a natural looking pawn to g6, you can go nuts and capture this pawn with the bishop. Now they have to recapture with their f-pawn, and after queen to f3 check, they have to give up the piece back by playing knight to f6, and yeah, that's just, this is just crushing. You can see it's +8 almost. And if they don't capture on d4, but they push the pawn forward to c5, grabbing even more space, we still go knight to b5. They can have our bishop, but we will get theirs, and also we will make sure their king is not getting castled. So this is once again a very pleasant position for white, although it's just +1.6. Anyways, guys, I think I covered all the lines that I wanted to cover. I hope you had some fun. I most certainly did. So, just go ahead and crush the Owen defense with this tricky opening line. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.